Hello and good morning and good afternoon to everyone else who's watching us from other areas of the world. This is a Fireside chat. I'm Michael Fembeck. I'm the CEO of the Zero Project, and I'm delighted to have Mira Shenoy as a guest for this Fireside. Mira Shenoy is the founder and CEO of Youth for Jobs, a large Indian disability service provider and a good friend as well, and a co-organizer of the Zero Project India Conference and many other partnerships that we have developed in these past years. So welcome, Mira.
Hi, Michael. So good to be here. And yes, it's a good afternoon. I'm missing being there this year, and therefore it's still good to at least see and participate virtually.
Okay, Mira, let's kick it off by you introducing yourselves and Youth for Jobs in some 2 or 3 minutes, so that we get the context of the work of yours that we are discussing in the next question.
Sure. So Youth for Jobs, the vision of Youth for Jobs is that every youth with disability should be out of poverty and active and independent. And the pathway we use is what we know best, which is upskilling the youth and linking them to a sustained livelihood, which means either a job or an enterprise. Because this work is challenging, we do it through a whole range of partnerships in India itself, from government to community to not-for-profits, educational institutions, and civil society. The work is at scale. It's in pan-India. We work with 18 disabilities, and our skilling programs are at different levels depending on the geography, depending on the educational level and the disability. So we work at the grassroots, and that gives really the reach, because as you know, in India and developing countries, almost 69% is in rural areas, and those are the most vulnerable because they're completely cut off from markets. So we train those youth, both young men and women with disabilities, and then we link them to sustained either jobs or enterprises. Women are increasingly becoming important for us too. We're very happy to work on several areas with the Zero, which is women with disabilities. That's called We Do, the grassroots project of ours, and now the new area which we're going to talk in this chat about, co-vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
Michael, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Mira, for this excellent introduction of Youth for Jobs and for your work. And what we learned, and this is what I would like to get a little background on what this actually means. We are discussing and we are quite interested in your new focus on, as you just mentioned, co-vulnerabilities. So what is it? Why you're taking this as an approach? How do you frame co-vulnerabilities?
Co-vulnerabilities is an area where where you actually do look at the intersectionality. For example, you have gender, but when it's women with disabilities, then those get neglected. Likewise, you have climate issues. Climate affects several people, but for people with disabilities, because they're so invisible, no one tracks them. Likewise, in India, caste is important more than color. So if you have Dalits with the disability, again, completely invisible, 100%, 200%. So what that means is that in this whole space of co-vulnerabilities, Michael, since innovations are so important and they are actually the heart of the Zero Project, what we really need to do is to have a focused approach to get innovative solutions in the space for the co-vulnerable, and then see how we can scale them up.
Yeah, so did a good job in explaining what the subject is, what the topic is. Also, I think we all agree that innovations are needed and working together, but I trust knowing your work, you have a quite specific approach how to tackle this, how to get this into action. So what's your plan to action in relation to co-vulnerabilities?
So let's begin with women with disabilities, because that's one of the space which we've been looking at together, where you help us with our networks. Now, if you look at women with disabilities, almost 44% of the population of disabled is women. They are 3 times less educated, at least 2 times less employed, and 2 to 3 times more prone to sexual exploitation compared to gender. Uh, very little work has been done in this space. So we have begun looking at a project on the invitation of the government uh, in the southern state of Karnataka. And the project is to actually sensitize the women groups who they have to disability and to economically empower 60,000 women with disabilities. The whole approach is a very community driven approach to build their capacities, work on policies, and put these assets in a common space so that the other governments, other state governments, can look at it. So before we do this, as a precursor of our work, Michael, we mounted a study which has just come out and which will get launched on Monday, which is unlocking women's ability to build a strong ecosphere to empower women with disabilities.
So there's a,
Broadly, what were the fund?
just could you
Yes, Michael.
give us a little, there's a new publication, so could you give us some more
Yes.
details on what's in it and where to find it?
Yeah. It gets launched on Monday with the government. So then it'll go on both the government linkage and on our website, which is www.youthforjobs.org. What we found was that because of the attitudes which other women have, leave alone the male, to women with disabilities, what was happening was they were afraid to take any kind of risks, afraid to take loans to set up an enterprise. They were not participating in any of the group meetings. They said they had no role models. And because they had no voice, the banks thought that they were unbankable. So they could not, have any access to any savings. The other aspect we found out was that uh, many of them were not digitally literate. In fact, most of them. And this means that the existing government schemes which are meant for the disabled, they were not aware of it. They were not aware of the fact that they could have access to assistive tech. And therefore, the entitlements got lost, which was, really a pity. And the third was all of them wanted trainings, whether for jobs or for employment, because every woman wants money in her pocket. She says, I need it so that I can educate my kid better, we can have better access to health. So it was very clear that women with disabilities face exclusion. And if you don't have a focused approach, then you cannot work on the livelihoods, and there are no financial pathways for economic empowerment. And we all know that economic and social empowerment go together.
Thank you, Mira. Now let's move over to the second topic within your new framework, which is climate change. What's your? I think we all have a basic understanding of that this is not affecting everyone at the same time, but people with disabilities are more affected. What's your angle and what's your approach and with when it comes to climate change and disability?
I think the biggest worry is the stark data when you look at it, Michael, because in India, they say the data shows that about 45 million people by 2050, and at least 85% of our districts are at risk because of the extreme climate changes which are going to happen, whether it's through heat waves, whether it's through flood, drought, or cyclone. And this, as we all know, intensifies the risk for persons with disabilities because they're completely vulnerable. In countries like India, they are not in all the official databases, and thus they also get excluded from policy intervention. So just to expand it a little more, uh, there are several unaddressed barriers for them. For example, what happens is that how can and many of these can be addressed, for example, by assistive tech. For example, when there's a climate disaster, the most prominent challenge is mobility. We all know very well that it's challenging for persons with disabilities with limited mobility to flee the area, you know, whether it's whether it's in flood or whatever, because public transport is certainly not possible. But if we invest in assistive tech, which looks at mobility aids, which looks at accessible transport devices, these can play a very, very crucial role in addressing mobility challenges, ensuring timely and safe evacuation, and of course, you know, you need to invest in specialized training.
Yeah, thank you for pointing this out. So it gives us a little understanding of some areas where climate change hits already people with disabilities more than other people, mobility, evacuation, but there's definitely more. There's water shortages, there's the heat. I think you have a more general approach how to research and how to get a grip on this topic to even understand the needs and the all the angles and dimensions of this fast and steady growing crisis response, as we call it in the Zero project. So what's your call to action or your work in that area?
Yeah, I think the call to action is it's very clear that the field's progression, if you need to look at an important space like co-vulnerability, the field's progression is based on building a credible knowledge base. You need to bring all the actors together. You need to align them on a common agenda, build connections, direct our resources to these underserved areas, and finally influence policy. I think that's the goal we should set about, and what better agenda or what better occasion than the Zero project, which has so many interested stakeholders to build this common agenda, Michael, for co-vulnerabilities.
Is there something concrete on your end that has already been done or started? And I ask you for a short answer because I would also like to follow up this. What we as the Zero Project are doing is to tend to wrap up this session.
Yeah. So I think what we are doing is that we are looking, as I said, these subsectors, women with disability, climate induced migrants or climate induced, what it means for women, for persons with disabilities, and then to look at Dalits with disabilities. So we've begun by the first study, which is for women with disabilities. So one by one, we'll start looking at this. But more important, I think what we have done for the women with disabilities is we brought together all the important stakeholders who work on gender, okay, and who look at economic empowerment and who are interested in impact. So this way we bring, and of course the government. So we're bringing all these stakeholders together to get them interested in the space of women with disability, which is one of the area of co-vulnerability. And that's what we plan to do for all the others.
Mm. Thank you, Mira. So I mentioned already, but also again for the audience here, there's a close cooperation between the work of the Youth for Jobs in India and the Zero projects here in Vienna, but with its global outreach and your focus on climate change that you mentioned, and you described some examples of what this means in practice, will be one of the core focus area of the next Zero Project call for nominations. So when this Zero Project conference is over, not immediately, but a few weeks later, we start with the next research topic. We have this research cycle. So the next upcoming topic is accessibility, which includes also technology. But for the first time, we add crisis response as a really broad and focused research topic, understanding the needs that you described, Amira, but also reflecting many other people's interest and willingness also to cooperate and to build new shared knowledge networks on that. And this is what we also mean by giving a focus on the Zero Project on next year's topic of crisis response. So Stay tuned with the Zero Project if you have outstanding innovations, if you want to collaborate, if you want to contribute. The next year's Zero Project research is also on crisis response. With this, thank you, Mira, for joining in. It was a pleasure having you as always. We meet each other in India at the Zero Project India conference in November. And with this, I'm closing this fireside chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And welcome all to Zero Project India conference in November.
Thank you.